All right, friends, I am here to talk to you today about this book, Smoke. I talked about it in my TBR for November, and I have just finished it, and I have a lot of thoughts. Now, these are going to be thoughts that have spoilers. I don't feel like I'm doing you a disservice, though, because I really do not recommend this book. I'm not a fan, but I will explain why. If spoilers for this book are something that you don't want to see, then unfortunately, I will have to turn you away, but I gotta jump into this. So, Smoke by Dan Vyleta. What is the kind of premise of this book? So this book takes place in an alternative history, sort of, in a Victorian England, where basically, if you sin, or if you do something sinful, it is visibly manifested in the physical world in the form of smoke. So if you think something impure, your mouth, or like smoke will come out of your mouth or your nose or your ears. If you think violent thoughts or do something wrong, it will manifest itself in your body physically smoking. So what happens is, rich children are brought to schools where they're taught right from wrong, and they're taught to, be virtuous people that don't cause smoke. And they have these checks where they go around and they look at your clothes and your bed sheets, and they inspect you constantly to make sure that you are not sinning. So then you find out, as you explore the world that Vyleta has created here, that there is a sort of classist system here that's been developed where the rich people are sent to these schools where they're taught to be virtuous people who do not manifest their sin. Meanwhile, the normal people go, like cities like London, these huge cities are just kind of cesspools of sin, where they're constantly smoking. Everyone there's smoking. The smoke, when you breathe it, kind of encourages more illicit behavior from the people that are smelling it. So, of course, in the big cities where it's constantly happening, smoke breeds smoke into other people, and the sin manifests itself in all sorts of various ways. You have thievery, murder, violence, just wild sexual sin that can manifest itself. So basically what you have here is you have these safe havens where boys and girls are separated, of course, into different schools, and they are taught to be virtuous people. Now, the real interest, and I really do believe that's a cool premise. The interesting part, which I also think is kind of cool, is probably maybe a third into the story, you begin to realize that there are ways to manipulate this physical condition of the smoke. There's essentially a candy, a medicine of sorts, that if you suck on the candy, it will absorb the smoke before it becomes visibly manifest. And you find out that the people that are in charge at the governments and the schools, the higher ups, the higher classes, have the availability to obtain this candy, which is not available to the common folk. So they use that, essentially, to maintain a higher class and a power over those people below them. Obviously, it's hypocritical because they're saying they're virtuous people, but they're actually allowed to sin without anyone knowing by holding on to this candy. And it, of course, creates a justice imbalance here, where you have people that are unjustly, imposing all of their laws and standards in a way that is a lie, because they're not holding them themselves. So, we have this cool imbalance of systems in the classes, and you find out about this fairly early on. You also find out that there is a cigarette that's essentially tinged with a version of the smoke that allows one to partake in the enjoyment of the smoke in a way that doesn't affect anybody else. So essentially you have these rich people that have cigarettes and they have candies. They take the candies, they take the cigarettes. They can enjoy the smoke and rule over the people who they judge for being uncouth and dirty and sinful people. So this is a really cool setup, and you essentially, the story of the book is this struggle of justice between those people who are faking and hypocritical, lording their power over the weak. Of course, we can see parallels to this in real life, especially throughout history. This is an alternate history. So the thing that's interesting is that setup, and I like that setup. Unfortunately, most of those details are given to you by the third waypoint. And this book it's only 400 pages, but it feels so long because it really does start to drag. There's a lot of things that start happening, and they're introducing characters to you, and I guess I'm already spoiling things. They introduce some romance into the story that makes it's just awful, in my opinion. It doesn't make any sense. There's a character who falls in love. There's a girl character that falls in love with a male character, and their only connection is essentially that they're the first male and female that have ever interacted with each other, which kind of makes sense in this society where they keep the males and the females, especially children, separate. But the romance that develops over these characters is so poor, where basically them just being in the same vicinity is enough for her to feel this attraction to him and him to feel this attraction to her. Kind of makes sense in the context of the story. Unfortunately, so she develops a relationship with this character. It's not very romantic. It's very, the way that the book is written is certain things are described very flowery and certain things are just kind of matter of fact. So the romance is very matter of fact. It's not very romantic or sweet or interesting, frankly. But then when that character is kind of forced away from the group for an extended period of time, meaning like a week and a half, she then falls in love with the next male that she hates, who has nothing in common with her, shares no value structure with her, simply because, once again, he's the next male that's near her. So this girl seems to, and this is manifested at least one more time, where basically just this girl interacting with a male is enough for her to fall in love with them or feel attraction to them, which is just kind of weird and messed up and dumb and also not interesting. So you have this love triangle that develops. It's not very, it doesn't feel good. It's not romantic. It's just kind of matter of fact. You only know that they're attracted to each other because it's described that they're attracted to each other so many times. And when they breathe each other's smoke, they can kind of get each other's emotions into their own head. And so they're doing this. So this whole like second third of the book takes a huge sideline and just starts kind of info dumping about the world and the classes. But these are things that you can infer once you understand the setting of the story. They spend a lot of time in this romance that doesn't make any sense. And they spend a very long time hiding the fact that there are characters in the story who are trying to bring justice to the world and free people. This seems kind of interesting. You have this hypocritical overlord class and these underclass people that are being judged incorrectly who are trying to live normal. They're the working class. And there is a party working to upset the balance. This is interesting. And they do an absurd amount of talking about this as much as possible without giving any details. And there's a lot of lore given to, in the past, they've found people that don't smoke when they sin. And what does that mean? And then you get into like where you think that this is fantasy. You think this is just the world that people live in. You are somehow introduced to the fact that this is also very, very, very scientific, because it exists in an alternate history that at one point was kind of like our history, where everything having to do with the smoke didn't exist, and it was rewritten into all religious and historical texts. Like, they add smoke stuff to the Bible. They add smoke stuff to their history books. They add smoke to pictures. They don't have pictures where people don't smoke anymore. And you find out that this was added at some point into humanity. It's never explained. Maybe they'll get to it in the next book. I don't really care. But they explain that this was a scientific thing that was added to humanity. Eventually it's explained that it's a disease that emanates from the liver. This is not the normal state that mankind was in. They developed this over time. This takes a very long time to get to this point where you understand that that's what's happening. You find out a lot of different ways that they've tried to make the smoke go away. None of it is that interesting. The only thing you really get out of it is to try to get to the point where they can remove smoke from society. A lot of people who think they're doing good things do messed up things. They kidnap these innocent people that don't have the smoke disease, and they do horrible things to them, running tests on them. Or the other side of society that's trying to get rid of the smoke thinks that you can breed it out of people by having a pure race, basically, breed until all of the regular people are dead, and only the pure race without smoke can live, and they're immune. All of this takes an extremely long time. It's a lot of info dump, and it's not very interesting the way they explain it, but it still furthers the world. So then you find out, near the end of this book, that there is a method that these characters have been working on that's supposed to revolutionize the whole business. And it takes a very long point to get here. And what they plan on doing is they plan on setting off a chain reaction explosion that will cover the entire known world in smoke and soot. And in doing so, they're going to overthrow the balance of power by exposing everyone's smoke while destroying the methods that they use to hide their smoke, creating essentially anarchy. So their answer to fighting a totalitarian, overbearing, hypocritical government is to destroy everything and every form of institution so that everyone can willingly and essentially be encouraged to, by the release of the smoke, pursue all of their bare, raw, animalistic desires. And you might say, well, if the smoke, if other people breathe in the smoke and it makes them have like violent tendencies, or their evil is manifested, won't this kind of make everyone that is exposed to this giant explosion of smoke and soot, won't that make them actually like bad, and like all of their worst impulses will be enacted? Because every time we see this happen, it generally creates people doing, they're acting on their base urges, which are bad. It mostly results in violence and a lot of murder in the story. And one character just kind of explains it away by saying, no, they won't rape each other or kill each other. It'll just make them like love each other without fear of being judged by the hierarchy. And you're like, yeah, that's interesting. I would like people for people not to be judged by way of the hierarchy, and I would like for this classist system to be destroyed. But also, there's nothing except that person's word to say that, oh, once we just release humanity to their basis, essentially is saying, oh yeah, we're going to let anarchy reign, and also let a substance that forces people to pursue their worst instincts and their most base desires to just run free, and we're going to take away all the governmental institutions to do so. But they're not going to do anything bad. And so that character is foiled. They stop the person. But then they decide they were probably right, we should do it. And that's the part that doesn't make any sense. So I've struggled through this book to get to this point. And the characters who understand the injustice in the system and feel moral obligation to try to fix the system in a way that helps people choose to further the work of the people that kidnapped and tortured people and force humanity to live out its basest desires without any government. They basically push anarchy, believing this person's word that it'll probably not be that bad. And they do so even after they foil, and essentially it's there's a lot of background here, but they do so for all selfish reasons. They basically overturn all of society for selfish reasons because they believe someone's word that it won't cause any major problems. Just because, probably. And that really ticks me off. And the romance ticks me off. The way the setting is essentially abused and turned from something that's really interesting and thought-provoking into, well, this is a science, and clearly the science, it's inferred. I inferred it. It's not written. Was probably inflicted on man to control them, but I don't know. Like, it tries, what the book tries to do is it tries to be a statement on how religion and society where there is governmental institutions is inherently evil because of man's propensity to lord that power over other people. essentially man's propensity, human nature, is evil because one man lords his power over another. It's a very common, what is the saying that people say? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. But their answer to the solution is, well, yeah, if we have power structures in place, which had to have been created at some point, probably. If we topple the power structures and just let people roam, it'll all be good now. As if the people cannot create new power structures, and especially if they're acting on their basis instincts with a drug-like effect, definitely won't go Purge style. I've never seen The Purge, but I know what it is. Purge style, and just start killing each other and freaking doing horrible things throughout all of society. All of it is maddening, and it's frustrating, and the romance triangle is terrible, and they just, by the way, they end up just in a polyamorous relationship. They decide that that's okay now because the world has been destroyed. Those generally don't go well for women. It's, the whole thing is terrible and it sucks. And it makes me extra mad because it's such an awesome premise that could have led to so many cool things. But the method that they get there is terrible. It's dry. The writing is not very interesting for most of the middle part of the book. The romance is not romantic, and most of the ways that things are described everything feels like it's interesting, and then it turns out that it's not. That's essentially the whole book. And I really was just kind of hate reading the end, and it kept getting worse. And those are the thematic problems. Those are the written problems. The thematic problems I've already mentioned. And in the meantime, there's like a villain that runs through the book, and there's a whole subplot involving a character who essentially becomes a supervillain throughout the story, and they defeat him, and they use his body to enact the final like, maybe the second book comes around and shows how foolish this idea is, but I just couldn't care enough for the characters. I just punched my microphone. For the characters in the story to get there. And it was maddening. And if I hadn't had people mention on the video that they wanted to hear about this book more, I might have just DNF'd it. There's a lot of people that, if you look up the Goodreads reviews, that DNF this between the 30 and 50% mark. Because it gets real dry in the middle, and they don't even get to the part where the romance that's not romantic happens. So yeah, I can't recommend it. I feel like I'm just ranting here, and maybe I should have had a structure here. I don't know. What I will say is that if you've seen this video, especially if you got this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm glad I could get this off my chest. I love being here on BookTube. It's been awesome so far. The community has been amazing. I have had way more interactions with people than I ever hoped possible, especially this early on. I just started this week. Now that I'm thinking about it, I just started this week, and it's been amazing. Thank you guys for watching this stuff. If you thought this was interesting, please leave a like, leave a comment below. I don't know if you've read this book, if this sounds interesting to you. I don't recommend it. I'm going to give it 2 stars. 2 out of 5 stars. And I'm only giving it those 2 I feel conflicted. I feel like maybe I should just give it 1 star, but at least the setup was interesting enough that I should give it 2 stars. But maybe the fact that they ruined the setting, I should give it 1 star. I'll just stick at 2 stars because that's all I don't want to think about this book anymore. I finished this book this evening even. I'm making this book at nighttime, and I don't want to think about it anymore. Unless you guys have questions, and you can ask me those in the comments below. If you have any other thoughts, let me know. And thank you for watching. If you want to see more reviews or more stuff from me, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell button. You'll get notifications when I post a new video. It's been great to be here on BookTube. Thank you so much. I really hope that the next video I get to talk about will be something that I really like. I'm sorry that the first review that I'm posting is so negative. I feel bad. I hope this makes sense in post because I did just rant the entire time. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.